Hello and welcome to a professional development video on promoting student accountability for grammar and mechanics. I'm Cheryl Duffus, I'm your QEP director. If you're watching this, then you're already on our QEP Blackboard organization. You can see here I've got links for the PowerPoint I'm about to use and then some other sources and handouts that I'm going to be talking about during the presentation. So the first thing I want to emphasize is that this is about promoting student accountability. This is not about how to teach grammar and mechanics. When we first, when the QEP committee first started letting y'all know what the SLOs were going to be for the QEP, and there was the one that has grammar and mechanics in it, and people would comment to me or I would get emails, I'm not teaching grammar and mechanics, blah, blah, blah. Whoa, whoa, whoa. We're not asking you to teach grammar and mechanics, although if you would like to, you're encouraged to. But rather, we're asking that we all promote student accountability for editing for their grammar and mechanics mistakes, promoting student accountability for being aware of their patterns of mistakes and learning how to recognize them and correct them themselves. Because what I want to get everyone away from is this idea that we have to line edit all of our students' work or make the corrections for them, but that doesn't help them to learn how to find their mistakes and how to correct them themselves. And we need to help them do this not only because it empowers them to do things for themselves, but because they should be doing this for themselves in the workplace. They're not going to have a teacher attached to them after they leave here who's going to constantly be taking that red pen to every email that they write. So this really is a life skill for them. So that's why the first thing I just want to say is that the main thing this is about is helping to hold students accountable for learning to correct and identify their writing errors, because we all have patterns of mistakes. So I think one thing that we can do is that we can first communicate to students why learning this standard classroom English is important and which context we must use it in. And so it's not just classroom English, it's also typically going to be the English of the business world. People are going to expect that you can write emails in standard academic English and that they're going to make sense and that they're not going to have weird semicolons tossed in them everywhere. I've got a source here that might help, because sometimes I have found students think it's just like crazy me, crazy Cheryl Duffus is the one who thinks that this is important. And research actually has shown that many students think that only English teachers care about grammar and mechanics. Not true. All of the feedback that y'all gave us when we were at the retreat, when we were asking you what about student writing could be improved, one of the number one things all of y'all said were grammar and mechanics. So obviously this is something that we all share a value for. So I found this article here in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, and it's about the importance of teaching students standard English. And so it's not about teaching them that whatever dialect they grew up in, whatever dialect they speak at home with family and friends is wrong. It's just different. And so the one we use in the classroom and in the business world is just different than what we might use with our family and friends. So, and this person talks about this idea that certain dialects have been discriminated against. This could take on connotations of racism if a different race or ethnicity is involved. And so this is all true that these things have happened in the past, but this person argues to accepted norms in the workplace and by college educated professionals. And so, you know, you can let this source kind of do some of your work for you. It's not just me, it's not just Gardner Webb, it's not English teachers, it's that we're trying to give you career skills. We're trying to help you be successful in your professional lives where, you know, you can't use a dialect necessarily in your professional lives. So that might help take some of the pressure off of you. So after that, something else I'd like to share, and I actually just realized this recently doing the research for this QEP. If you do get a final draft of a paper and it's unacceptable for college level work in terms of the grammar mechanical errors, other types of errors that might be made, you are within your rights to just return it and ask for a revision. There is I think we should all just immediately stop feeling like we have to deal with a paper where every single typed line you feel like you're circling or correcting an error, because we are not line editors. We don't work for the New Yorker. We're not being paid to do these things. We're being paid to empower them to fix it. So you can simply just say, I'm sure you had a time crunch. You got a bunch of other stuff going on, but I won't accept this. This is not acceptable work, and you need to redo it. So you can give them a late penalty for redoing it. You can tell them they have a 0 until they redo it. You can penalize the student in whatever way you would like. But if you think about it, this is probably similar to what would happen at work. I mean, if you turned in something to a superior and it was unacceptable, they wouldn't take it and fix it for you. That's just crazy. They would return it to you and say, make it better, because it's not that person's job to do your job. So if you think about it in this way, in those terms, it's the student's job to turn something into you that is acceptable, and you're within your rights not to accept anything that isn't. So I think that's a good way to try to avoid getting sucked into those train wreck scenarios. Another thing you can do is you can advise them to go to the writing center, to work with another student. You can even sit down with them if they are confused and they don't understand. Okay, let's look at your 2 or 3 main problems, but do not correct and rewrite a paper for anyone. It's just not worth it. Something else you can do that might be helpful for students is to communicate the errors that make you the most crazy. We all have our personal things. Mine is the comma with the conjunction, and it's not joining 2 independent clauses. This just drives me absolutely nuts. Something else that drives me nuts is random capitalization, because I think this happens in autocorrect and texting. And also, no one can use an apostrophe. These things drive me absolutely nuts. And so you can just share that with your students, and then they'll know. We should also all be aware that we all have different lists of what drives us crazy, and we all grade differently, and we all penalize grammar mechanics differently. So I think making our expectations, our individual expectations, known to students helps them out a lot. Now, when I did do this one semester with freshman composition, I did it with the capitalization and with the apostrophe and possession, because I was like, y'all, you have got to conquer this, because you are going to be discriminated against in the workplace, because you're going to look like you're going to be labeled, dumb millennials who don't know the English language. And so, I mean, that is it. That is all I paid attention to, because their sentences, I mean, they did not know how to show possession. They did not know how to use an apostrophe in any way. And they had random weird capitalizations, like it was really bad German or something. So I said, you all just have to focus on these, and you need to get them under control. And they did, because I penalized them very harshly on my rubric. So they all learned. Something else you could do, you could either focus on, 2 or 3 that you think are a big problem, or you could categorize errors from most serious to distracting, or something similar like that. And I'm going to hop out of here again and show you another resource. Oh gosh, I didn't even upload this, and I meant to. Hold on a second. I will get this uploaded to the Blackboard. An example of this can be found. I photocopied from 2 works. One is from Barbara Walvord. I don't want 200%. 100%. There we go. Assessing and improving student writing. And she again reminds us, to distinguish between formal and informal writing, making sure everybody is working hard. She has a thing on her cover letter or reflection letter. Students have to check off that they have edited their paper at least 3 times. And this ESWE for her is error-free standard written English. I like this, error-free. It's very aspirational. Or checking off that the student has asked at least one other person to read the paper, etc. So she's building in some checks and balances and accountability. And it's good to get students to ask for help, because we do this at work too. Hey, will you look at this and make sure it's correct, or it makes sense, or something like that. Yeah, so you can read over her suggestions here. Something that she suggests that you can do is that you can collect their papers. This, I guess, if they turn them in paper. And you can hold them for 3 days and then hand them back and ask them to do that editing. Sometimes They just don't leave themselves enough time. And then once they've had the time, and if you give them time in class, then they might catch some of these works. You can model how someone might edit their own work. You could pick out some writing of your own and look at some of the patterns of errors that you have, etc. So here's where she says, you know, you can share your expectations. You can do it by the level of your distraction, how much certain errors distract you. You know, you can define them. These are the errors and make a list of them. I had a college professor who did that, and I still have his list to this day, etc. This next page here is from John Bean's Engaging Ideas, which I have used a lot. He divides them up. He divides errors up into status marking errors, and he includes things in here like incorrect verb forms, subject-verb agreement, things that are big red flags. Very serious errors, serious, and then serious errors, and then perhaps mildly distracting errors. So that is a good thing that you can do there. You can also, if you do individual conferences, or if you feel like a student has a big problem and needs an intervention, you can have a short conference. Again, with student writing conferences, I emphasize that you put a time limit on them and that you not get sucked into doing all the work for the student. You provide guidance and help. You don't do their work for them. So I would say if you do talk to a student about grammar mechanics, I would say pick the most significant errors, so the ones that are the most serious or the ones that they repeat the most, because student writers, they will, if they can't use a comma with a conjunction, they will never do it correctly. So I would say pick out one paragraph in the essay and show them, this is how you identify your problem. You have this problem with semicolons. So go through your paper and circle all the semicolons, or you can tell them, you know, you can go to find, type in a semicolon, and the computer will literally take you to every place there's a semicolon. So help the student identify the problem in one paragraph, and then show the student how you correct it, and then ask them to do it in at least one other paragraph, if not two. And so again, this is getting them to do work too, because like I said, you're not going to be attached to them when they leave and go out into the workplace. So again, it's all about holding them accountable and empowering them to correct and find their own errors. I would also recommend when grading, we can all fall into the trap of correcting the errors, writing down what the errors are, leaving feedback like this. One thing you can do that will cut down on your stress and cut down on the time that you're grading is you can use a strategy called minimal marking for grammar mechanics. And this is where you just put a check mark in the margin next to the sentence with an error. And you can put one check mark for each error, because we've all been there when a sentence might have more than one check mark. So what I have done with this is I will have it's usually the first set of graded writing assignments, and then I'll hand them back with these check marks, and I'll make the students get in their small writing groups, and I make them identify the errors and correct them, because they know. They have had grammar instruction K through 12. My daughter has grammar construction in her first grade class. So, you know, they have been taught all of this stuff. It's just they haven't been held accountable for identifying the errors and correcting them. So it's really kind of fun because when you do this, because all of a sudden they realize, oh, that's what a comma splice is, and oh, I'm not the only one who does this, and they talk about it in their own language and they explain it to themselves in a way that they can understand. So I also will have them write these errors on the board and give me the examples and show me how they corrected them. So this takes some time to do in class, but it has a huge impact. And just think about, you know, if there's one thing you could change about grading writing, it probably would be, I wish they didn't make grammatical and mechanical errors. My dream. But if you can just cut down on this, even like 20–30%, I think your life would be a lot easier. As I've said in other videos, one of my goals for the QEP is for all of our lives to be easier when we're grading and not feeling like you want to get another career. Again, never line edit student writing. It's a waste of your time, and they're not going to do anything with it. They're just going to say, oh, I had a bunch of errors, but it's not teaching them anything. I would say point out another thing you can do instead of the minimal marking, point out the first example of an error and tell the student, I know you've done this some more. It's impossible that you only made this error once. I would recommend using a penalty or a deduction to the final grade for grammar and mechanics. I think that this, for years, I just had, it was part of the overall grade, you know, grammar A, B, C, D. I just never thought I penalized it enough. I could never make it figure out what percentage it needed to be, and so I just have a penalty for writing errors. If you have one small error, then you get a point off, and on from there. So I would say check out some of my sample rubrics in the rubric section, and you can see how I do this. I feel that this really lets students see the impact, sometimes in a dramatic way, that these errors can have on their writing. I would say too, in the reflection letter that you're hopefully having them turn in with the final draft, ask them to identify the errors that they saw in the rough draft, the one they peer reviewed or took to the writing center or whatnot, and then show them, give the sentence where there's the error, and then show the sentence where it's corrected. And that way you see it very quickly in the reflection letter. You're seeing that they are doing this step in the writing process. You can also, like the Barbara Walvoord, check a box indicating that they have edited 3 times for errors. And again, this other tip that she gave, I won't repeat here. So there are lots of things that you can do to make the students do more editing. And a lot of this, could happen outside of class. Yeah, so I would say you can also get a sample student essay. As you reflect on this, practice some minimal marking, practice, only identifying it the first time and just letting go, marking every single error, because it just slows you down while you're grading, and it just makes me really crabby. You think about your hierarchy of errors. What are the ones that drive you most nuts? And you can think about, what do you think is a fair penalty for grammar and mechanics? And when you think about it, for me, this really separates the A, B, C, and D. To me, if something is a huge train wreck, it shouldn't get an A or a B. And I think why I went to the penalty is I was having students, my rubric rewarded them very favorably for the quality of their ideas and all of that, but it was not penalizing them sufficiently for sloppiness. And it's the whole package. They have to have the whole package, to get a good grade. So I'm just going to point out a couple other resources, then I'll let you go. I do have some sample reflection letters here that will show you how you can ask students to do these things, the check marks, or put in the sample corrections. Here I've just got some links to grammar and mechanics, managing grammar when you're grading, the top 20 errors in TUG writing. This Grammar Girl website is something that you could do to, provide supplemental instruction for students. You could do exercises there. She's got tips and stuff, so it's just something a little bit more fun. And here is an online grammar and writing guide. It's got quizzes, English rules, all this stuff. If you're interested in providing some instruction to your students, you could use this. If there's a student who you think needs the practice, you could require it. You could give it as extra credit, whatever you would like to do. Let's see. I also have some stuff in here about teaching non-native English learners. Sometimes this comes up with grammar and mechanics, although I believe these are 2 separate problems. Typically with English language learners or ESL students, I treat the fluency issues separately from any grammar and mechanical issues that they have in common with the native speakers. So, stuff like comma splices, that kind of error, if that's something that the native speakers are also doing, then I hold the ESL students equally accountable. But typically with fluency issues, I cut them some slack, because it can take people 7 years to get fluent in English. Here I just have some resources about working with students who are second language learners, some of it from Purdue OWL. There's lots of stuff. There's a fact sheet about grammar mechanics. Talking about plagiarism with ESL students is a little bit different. So here, this might give you some vocabulary for talking about grammar mechanics. Right here, this is a website geared specifically towards ESL students. And again, you might be able to use these to help you talk about grammar, as well as to show your students what it is you want them to do. So again, I would treat the two differently so that they don't feel like they're being penalized for not being fluid, etc. So this is about all I have to share about grammar and mechanics. If you have any tips, any great things that you're doing in your classroom, please let me know so I can share with everyone else. If you have any questions or concerns you want to talk about with me, then you can email, you can phone, you can stop by my office. Thank you all, and have a great day.